The sun was beginning its slow descent over Clearwater Lake, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The water shimmered under the golden light, creating a serene and almost magical atmosphere. Families were scattered around the area, some lounging on picnic blankets while others strolled along the shoreline. Children's laughter filled the air as they chased each other or built sandcastles near the edge of the lake. It was one of those perfect summer evenings where everything seemed peaceful and carefree. Among the visitors that day was Danny, an 11-year-old boy who loved spending time outdoors despite the challenges life had thrown his way. Danny used a wheelchair because he couldn't walk, but that didn't stop him from enjoying the world around him. His mother, Lisa, always made sure to bring him places like Clearwater Lake so he could feel included and experience moments of joy just like any other kid. Today, she pushed his wheelchair carefully down a small ramp leading closer to the water. Danny's eyes lit up when he saw the gentle waves lapping against the shore. "Mom, can we stay here for a bit?" Danny asked, his voice full of excitement. "I want to put my feet in the water." Lisa smiled warmly at her son. She loved how curious and cheerful he was, even though life hadn't been easy for him. "Of course, sweetie," she replied, adjusting the brakes on his wheelchair before kneeling beside him. "Let me roll up your pants first." As Lisa helped Danny prepare, a man named Jake sat nearby on his motorcycle, looking out of place, among the happy families. He wore a leather jacket covered in patches, dark sunglasses, and boots that looked heavy enough to crush rocks. A cigarette dangled from his lips, and every now and then, he took a long drag before exhaling smoke into the air. Jake wasn't exactly the type you'd expect to see at a family-friendly spot like Clearwater Lake. In fact, he seemed annoyed by all the noise and laughter surrounding him. Jake had spent most of the afternoon drinking beer straight from a cooler strapped to the back of his bike. Empty cans lay scattered around his feet, glinting in the fading sunlight. He muttered to himself occasionally, shaking his head whenever kids ran past him screaming or laughing too loudly. To him, this place felt suffocating. Too many people. Too much happiness. He preferred quieter spots where no one bothered him, but today he'd decided to take a ride without thinking much about where it would lead him. Now stuck at the lake, he felt trapped. While Jake stewed in his irritation, Danny and Lisa continued enjoying their time together. Lisa rolled up Danny's pant legs and positioned his wheelchair so his feet hung just above the water. She grabbed a towel and placed it across his lap to keep him dry. "There you go," she said with a grin. "Now you can feel the cool water on your toes." Danny wiggled his feet happily, letting out a soft laugh as the water tickled his skin. "It feels amazing, Mom," he exclaimed. "Can we come here every weekend?" Lisa chuckled softly. "We'll try our best," she promised, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. Watching her son enjoy something as simple as dipping his feet in the lake made her heart swell with gratitude. Life might have dealt them a tough hand, but moments like these reminded her of how resilient Danny was and how important it was to cherish the little things. Unbeknownst to Lisa and Danny, Jake had noticed them too. At first, he barely paid attention, lost in his own grumpy thoughts. But as time passed, he found himself growing increasingly irritated by their presence. Something about the way Lisa fussed over Danny, making sure he was comfortable, struck a nerve. Maybe it was the contrast between his lonely, angry existence and the bond they shared. Or maybe it was just the sound of Danny's laughter cutting through the quiet hum of the evening. Whatever the reason, Jake's mood darkened further. He stubbed out his cigarette and reached for another beer, cracking it open with a sharp hiss. As he drank, he glanced sideways at Danny and Lisa again. This time his gaze lingered longer than before. There was something about the boy's wheelchair that fueled his frustration. Jake didn't understand why someone like Danny deserved such attention and care. To him, the world already felt unfair, and seeing parents dote on a child who couldn't even walk only added fuel to his bitterness. Without realizing it, Jake started moving closer to them. His boots crunched against the gravel path, drawing faint looks from nearby families. Most people chose to ignore him, assuming he was just passing through. No one suspected what was brewing inside his mind, a dangerous mix of anger, resentment, and impulsiveness. When Jake finally stopped a few feet away from Danny and Lisa, he crossed his arms and stared down at them, His expression was unreadable behind his sunglasses, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Lisa noticed him standing there and gave him a polite nod, hoping to avoid any trouble. "Evening," she said cautiously. Jake didn't respond. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, studying Danny's wheelchair with a strange intensity. For a brief moment, it looked like he might say something, or maybe even walk away. But then, without warning, he reached out and gave the wheelchair a hard shove. The impact was sudden and jarring. Danny's wheelchair lurched forward, sending him tumbling toward the water. Lisa let out a terrified scream, scrambling to grab hold of her son. But it was too late. Danny fell into the lake with a splash, disappearing beneath the surface for a split second before resurfacing, coughing and sputtering. Panic erupted instantly. Parents rushed to help, shouting instructions and calling for someone to call 911. Lisa dove into the water without hesitation, her maternal instincts kicking in despite her fear of swimming. She reached for Danny, trying desperately to pull him back to safety, but the weight of his soaked clothes and the awkward position of his body made it nearly impossible for her to lift him alone. Amid the chaos, Jake stood frozen, his face pale, with shock. He hadn't meant for things to escalate this far. Sure, he'd wanted to cause a little disruption, to vent his anger in some small way. But watching Danny struggle in the water, his tiny arms flailing helplessly, sent a wave of guilt crashing over him. For the first time in years, Jake felt truly afraid, not of getting caught, but of what he had done. Just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get worse, two figures emerged from the crowd. They were tall, muscular, and unmistakably famous. One wore a sleeveless shirt that showcased his impressive physique, while the other sported a confident smirk that radiated charisma. It was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and John Cena, two wrestling legends who had happened to be relaxing by the lake after a charity event earlier that day. Seeing the commotion, they sprang into action without hesitation. The Rock immediately jumped into the water, his powerful strokes cutting through the waves with ease. John followed closely behind, shouting words of reassurance to the frantic crowd. Within seconds, The Rock reached Danny, scooping him up with surprising gentleness given his size. Together, he and John brought the boy safely back to shore, where Lisa collapsed in relief, tears streaming down her face. For Jake, the sight of these two heroes stepping in only deepened his shame. He knew he was in serious trouble, and worse, he knew he deserved it. The chaos at Clearwater Lake escalated quickly after Danny fell into the water. Screams echoed through the air as families scrambled to figure out what had happened. Lisa, soaked and trembling, clung tightly to her son, checking him over for injuries. Danny coughed violently, trying to catch his breath, but otherwise seemed unharmed. His small hands gripped his mom's arms, seeking comfort in the midst of the confusion. People crowded around them, offering blankets, towels, and words of encouragement. Some were visibly angry, glaring daggers at Jake, who stood nearby looking pale and shaken. Others whispered among themselves, pointing fingers and debating whether someone should call the police. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and it felt like the entire lake held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Jake, meanwhile, wanted nothing more than to disappear. He hadn't meant for things to go this far. Sure, he'd been annoyed by the noise and the sight of Lisa fussing over Danny, but he never imagined his reckless shove would send the boy tumbling into the water. Now faced with the reality of what he'd done, Jake couldn't stop replaying the moment in his mind. He saw the shock on Lisa's face when the wheelchair lurched forward, heard the splash as Danny hit the water, and felt the weight of everyone's accusing stares pressing down on him. It was too much. For a brief second, Jake considered running. His motorcycle was just a few steps away, and if he acted fast, he could speed off before anyone stopped him. But something held him back. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, or maybe the realization that running wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he stood rooted to the spot, his head bowed, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Amid the commotion, two figures appeared, drawing gasps from the crowd. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and John Cena, both towering and unmistakably famous, stepped forward with purpose. They had been relaxing nearby after attending a charity event earlier in the day, enjoying some rare downtime away from their busy schedules. When they heard the screams and saw the panic spreading across the lake, they didn't hesitate to act. The Rock was the first to dive into the water, his muscular frame cutting through the waves effortlessly. Despite his imposing size, his movements were graceful and deliberate. John followed close behind, shouting instructions to keep people calm and organized. "We've got this," he called out, his voice steady and reassuring. "Everyone step back and give us room." When the Rock reached Danny, he lifted the boy gently out of the water, cradling him like a father carrying his child. Danny clung to him instinctively, still coughing but beginning to calm down as he realized he was safe. Together, the Rock and John made their way back to shore, where Lisa waited anxiously, tears streaming down her face. She reached out for her son the moment they arrived, pulling him into a tight hug. "Thank you," she choked out, her voice barely audible over the noise of the crowd. "Thank you so much." The Rock knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're welcome," he said softly. "He's going to be okay." Then turning to Danny, he added with a warm smile, "You're a tough kid, aren't you?" Danny managed a weak nod, his wide eyes fixed on the man who had just saved him. For a moment, the fear and confusion melted away, replaced by awe and admiration. Even in his drenched state, Danny couldn't help but feel starstruck. After all, not every day did you meet your favorite wrestling heroes, and certainly not under circumstances like these. John Cena stayed focused, scanning the scene to ensure everything was under control. His sharp gaze landed on Jake almost immediately. There was no mistaking who was responsible for the incident. Jake's guilty expression and rigid stance told the whole story. Without hesitation, John strode toward him, his presence commanding enough to make even the burliest men think twice. "Hey," John said firmly, grabbing Jake by the arm. "You don't get to walk away from this." Jake flinched, his body stiffening, under John's grip. He opened his mouth to protest but found himself unable to speak. Up close, John Cena was even more intimidating than he looked on TV. His piercing eyes and confident demeanor left no room for excuses or lies. The Rock joined them a moment later, towering over Jake like a mountain. He crossed his arms over his chest, his expression stern but controlled. "What you did was unacceptable," he said in a low, measured tone. "Apologize to the boy and his mom right now." Jake swallowed hard, his throat dry. He glanced nervously between The Rock and John Cena, then toward Danny and Lisa, who were still wrapped in each other's arms. The shame and guilt he'd been feeling intensified tenfold under their scrutiny. All eyes were on him now, and there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. I'm sorry," Jake stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for this to happen, I swear." Lisa looked up, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She stared at Jake for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling but firm. "You could have killed my son," she said. "Do you understand that? Do you realize how dangerous what you did was?" Jake nodded vigorously, unable to meet her gaze. "I know," he admitted. "I messed up. I'm really sorry." The Rock and John exchanged a glance, silently communicating their next move. While neither of them condoned violence or cruelty, they also recognized that yelling or shaming Jake wouldn't solve anything. What mattered most was ensuring Danny's safety and making sure something like this never happened again. "Listen, carefully," John said, leaning closer to Jake. "An apology is a start, but actions matter more than words. You need to take responsibility for what you did today. That means owning up to your mistake and doing whatever it takes to make things right." Jake hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. Apologies were one thing, but taking responsibility? That sounded harder, scarier even. Still, he knew. He couldn't argue with two men who radiated authority and integrity. Slowly, he nodded again. "Okay," he muttered. "I'll do whatever I have to. Satisfied, for now." The Rock turned his attention back to Danny and Lisa. He crouched down so he was eye level with Danny, offering him a reassuring smile. "You're a brave kid," he said. Not many people could handle something like this with as much courage as you showed today. Danny blinked, surprised by the compliment. Really? He asked shyly. Absolutely, the Rock replied. And remember, life throws challenges our way sometimes, but it's how we respond that defines us. You handled this like a true champion. Danny grinned despite himself, his cheeks flushing with pride. Beside him, Lisa wiped away fresh tears, though these ones were born of gratitude rather than fear. She couldn't believe how lucky they were to have encountered such kind-hearted individuals in their darkest hour. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the lake, the mood began to shift. The initial panic gave way to relief, and the anger directed at Jake softened slightly, not because people forgave him, but because they understood that dwelling on negativity wouldn't change what had happened. What mattered now was moving forward and focusing on the good that came out of the situation. John Cena took charge of organizing the cleanup effort, directing volunteers to gather scattered belongings and tidy up the area. Meanwhile, The Rock stayed with Danny and Lisa, chatting with them and keeping spirits high. He shared funny stories about his own childhood, making Danny laugh until his sides hurt. By the time the sun finally disappeared below the horizon, leaving only the soft glow of fireflies and distant streetlights, the atmosphere at Clearwater Lake felt almost peaceful again. But for Jake, the evening wasn't over yet. As the crowd began to disperse, he lingered awkwardly, unsure of what to do next. Part of him wanted to slip away unnoticed, but another part, the part that felt genuine remorse, knew he couldn't leave without saying something more. Taking a deep breath, he approached Lisa and Danny one last time. I wanted to say thank you, he said quietly, for letting me apologize, and for not calling the cops on me. Lisa studied him carefully, searching for sincerity in his words. Finally, she sighed. I'm not excusing what you did, she said. But I can see you're sorry. Just promise me you'll think twice before acting out of anger again. Jake nodded earnestly. I will, he vowed. I swear. With that, he turned and walked away, his boots crunching against the gravel path. Whether he truly meant his apology remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. The events of that evening had left an indelible mark on everyone involved, including him. As the chaos at Clearwater Lake began to settle, a sense of calm slowly returned to the area. Families packed up their belongings, folding picnic blankets and gathering toys scattered across the grass. The earlier panic had given way to quiet conversations, with people sharing their thoughts about the incident and marveling at how quickly things could change in just a few minutes. Despite the shock of what had happened, there was also a feeling of gratitude. Gratitude for Danny's safety, for Lisa's quick thinking, and most of all, for the unexpected appearance of two heroes who turned the situation around. The Rock. And John Cena stayed behind longer than anyone expected, choosing not to rush off despite their busy schedules. They seemed genuinely invested in ensuring that Danny and Lisa were okay. After helping dry Danny off with a spare towel and making sure he wasn't hurt, they sat down with him and his mom, chatting casually, as if they'd known them for years. For Danny, this was nothing short of magical. He couldn't believe he was sitting face to face with two of his favorite wrestlers, men he'd only ever seen on TV. Do you guys wrestle every day? Danny asked shyly, breaking the ice after a long pause. His voice was still a little shaky, but his curiosity outweighed his nerves. John Cena chuckled, leaning back slightly so he could look directly at Danny. Not every day, he said with a grin. But we train a lot to stay strong and healthy. It's hard work, but it's worth it. Danny's eyes widened. I bet you could lift my wheelchair, huh? The Rock laughed, the deep rumble of his voice drawing smiles from everyone nearby. Probably, he said, flexing playfully. But I think your chair's pretty special. It helps you explore places you love, like this lake. That makes it important. Danny beamed at the compliment, his earlier fear fading further into the background. He glanced over at Lisa, who was watching the exchange with tears glistening in her eyes. She gave him an encouraging nod, silently urging him to keep talking. For the first time since the accident, she felt a glimmer of normalcy returning, a reminder that even in the worst moments, Life could find a way to surprise you. While The Rock and John Cena kept Danny entertained, Lisa took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. Her mind replayed the terrifying image of her son tumbling into the water, the sound of his coughs as he struggled to breathe. She shuddered at the thought of what might have happened if those two men hadn't been there. But instead of dwelling on the what-ifs, she focused on the present, the kindness of strangers, the bravery of her son, and the lessons they could take away from the experience. Lisa looked up as John Cena approached her, his expression thoughtful. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. "I know today was rough." She sighed, running a hand through her damp hair. "Honestly, I'm still processing it all," she admitted. "But I'm thankful. Thankful that Danny's okay and that you two were here to help. I don't know what would have happened otherwise." John nodded, his gaze steady. "You handled yourself incredibly well," he said. "It takes a lot of strength to stay calm in a situation like that. You should be proud of yourself and of Danny, too. He's got guts." Lisa smiled faintly, touched by his words. "Thank you," she murmured. "That means a lot." Meanwhile, The Rock continued bonding with Danny, asking him questions about school, his hobbies, and his dreams for the future. Danny lit up as he talked about his love for drawing and storytelling, describing the comic books he hoped to create someday. "I want to make superheroes who help people," he explained earnestly. "Like Spider-Man or Batman, but maybe ones who use wheelchairs." "That's awesome," The Rock said, clearly impressed. "Superheroes come in all shapes and sizes, and yours will inspire kids everywhere. Keep chasing that dream, okay? You never know where it might lead." Danny nodded enthusiastically, his excitement growing with each passing second. For a boy who had faced countless challenges in his young life, this moment felt like validation, a reminder that his differences didn't define him. They made him unique. As the evening wore on, The Rock and John Cena decided to stick around a little longer, mingling with the crowd and posing for photos with eager fans. Word had spread quickly about their heroic actions, and soon people were lining up to thank them personally. Some brought their children forward, hoping for autographs or pictures, while others simply wanted to shake their hands and express their gratitude. Both men handled the attention with humility, smiling warmly and taking time to connect with everyone. For Jake, the biker whose reckless actions had sparked the entire ordeal, the scene unfolding before him was almost surreal. He lingered near, the edge of the crowd, watching as The Rock and John Cena interacted with families, laughing and joking as if they didn't have a care in the world. Part of him felt like he didn't belong, not just because of what he'd done, but because he couldn't imagine being as kind or selfless as they were. Yet another part of him couldn't tear his eyes away. Something about their behavior fascinated him, stirring emotions he hadn't felt in years: admiration, regret, and perhaps even hope. Eventually, Jake mustered the courage to approach them again. This time, he wasn't trying to apologize or explain himself. He just wanted to say something meaningful. Standing a respectful distance away, he waited until The Rock noticed him and motioned for him to come closer. "What do you need, man?" The Rock asked, his tone neutral but not unfriendly. Jake hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. I just wanted to say thank you," he stammered, "for stepping in earlier. I messed up big time and I know I can't undo what I did. But seeing how you handled everything, it made me realize how much I need to change." John Cena stepped forward, his arms crossed but his expression softer than before. "Change isn't easy," he said, "but it starts with owning your mistakes and committing to doing better. That's what real strength looks like." Jake nodded, absorbing the words. "I'll try," he promised. "I won't forget this day, or the lesson I learned from it." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows cast by the setting sun. Whether he would follow through on his promise remained to be seen, but one thing was clear: the events of that evening had left an imprint on him, forcing him to confront parts of himself he'd rather ignore. Back at the lake, The Rock and John Cena prepared to leave. knowing they had done everything they could to turn a tragic situation into something positive. Before departing, they knelt beside Danny one last time, offering him final words of encouragement. "You're stronger than you think," the Rock told him. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And remember, we're rooting for you." Danny grinned, his heart swelling with pride. "Thanks," he said softly. "I won't forget this." As they climbed into their car and drove off into the night, the crowd erupted into applause, cheering for the two men who had gone above and beyond to help a stranger in need. For Danny and Lisa, the memory of that evening would stay with them forever, a testament to the power of kindness, resilience, and the extraordinary impact of ordinary people choosing to do the right thing. The days following the incident at Clearwater Lake passed quickly, but the ripple effects of that evening lingered in the minds of everyone involved. For Danny and Lisa, life slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though they carried with them the vivid memory of what had happened and the unexpected kindness that followed. Danny couldn't stop talking about the Rock and John Cena, recounting every detail of their encounter to anyone who would listen. His classmates at school were amazed when he showed them photos taken by strangers at the lake, capturing moments of him laughing alongside the two wrestling legends. Lisa, too, found herself reflecting on the event often. She thought about Jake's reckless actions and how easily things could have ended tragically. But more than anything, she thought about the lessons Danny had learned that day, not just from his own bravery, but from the compassion shown by those around him. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments there was light to be found if you knew where to look. Word of the incident spread far beyond Clearwater Lake. Local news outlets picked up the story after Lisa shared her experience online, writing a heartfelt post thanking the Rock and John Cena for their heroism. Her words resonated deeply with readers, many of whom praised the wrestlers not only for saving Danny, but for staying behind afterward to comfort him and others. Social media platforms buzzed with comments, likes, and shares, turning the story into a viral sensation almost overnight. People from all over the country reached out to express their admiration for the Rock and John Cena, calling them role models both inside and outside the ring. Some even mentioned how rare it was to see celebrities step up in such a personal way, using their influence for good, rather than simply moving on. Others focused on Danny, praising his courage and resilience despite the challenges he faced daily. Donations poured in for organizations supporting children with disabilities, inspired by Danny's determination to live life fully despite his circumstances. For Jake, however, the aftermath of the incident was far less glamorous. After leaving Clearwater Lake that night, he returned to his small apartment feeling weighed down by guilt and shame. He replayed the events in his mind over and over again, unable to shake the image of Danny tumbling into the water or the horrified screams of his mother. Sleep eluded him as nightmares took hold, forcing him to relive the moment again and again. Jake tried to distract himself by drinking, something he had always turned to in times of stress, but no amount of alcohol could silence the voice inside, his head telling him he needed to change. The Rock's words echoed in his mind. Real strength is owning your mistakes and committing to doing better. Though Jake had initially dismissed the comment as motivational fluff, it stuck with him in a way he hadn't expected. Deep down, he knew they were right. Change wasn't easy, but it was necessary if he wanted to live with himself. Determined to take action, Jake began attending support group meetings at a local community center. At first, he hesitated to share his story, unsure of how others would react. But as he listened to people talk about their struggles, addiction, anger management, loss, he realized he wasn't alone. Slowly, he opened up, admitting to the group what he had done at the lake and how it had forced him to confront his behavior. To his surprise, the group didn't judge him harshly. Instead, they offered encouragement, sharing their own experiences of hitting rock bottom and finding a path forward. One member, an older man named Frank, became particularly supportive. A former biker himself, Frank understood Jake's lifestyle and the frustrations that came with it. "You can't control everything that happens to you," Frank told him during one meeting. "But you can control how you respond. Start small. Make one good choice today, then another tomorrow." That's how you build a new life. Inspired by Frank's advice, Jake decided to take responsibility for his actions. He wrote a letter to Lisa, apologizing once again for what he had done and promising to do better. He included a check for a modest sum of money, explaining that he wanted to contribute to any medical bills or expenses related to the incident. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a tangible way to show he meant what he said. When Lisa received the letter, she read it carefully, her emotions mixed. Part of her still felt angry about what had happened, but another part recognized the sincerity in Jake's words. She showed the letter to Danny, asking for his thoughts. To her surprise, Danny shrugged and said, "If he's sorry, maybe we should forgive him." Lisa smiled softly, amazed by her son's ability to see the good in people. "Maybe you're right," she replied. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean giving someone a chance to prove they've changed. As weeks turned into months, Jake continued working on himself. He cut back on drinking, sold his motorcycle, and started volunteering at the community center where he attended meetings. Helping others gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years, and he began to rebuild his relationships with family members he had pushed away long ago. While he knew he couldn't erase the past, he hoped his efforts would demonstrate that he was truly trying to make amends. Meanwhile, The Rock and John Cena remained active supporters of the cause sparked by the incident. Both men used their social media platforms to raise awareness about accessibility issues at public spaces like Clearwater Lake. They encouraged their fans to donate to organizations dedicated to improving facilities for individuals with disabilities, emphasizing the importance of inclusivity and empathy. Their advocacy inspired local businesses to pitch in, raising funds to build a wheelchair-accessible dock at the lake so children like Danny could enjoy the water safely. Construction on the new dock began a few months later, drawing attention from the community. Volunteers gathered to help with the project, eager to contribute to something positive in the wake of such a harrowing event. When the dock was finally completed, a small ceremony was held to celebrate its opening. Families from all over town attended, including Danny and Lisa, who were invited to cut the ribbon together. Standing beside the sparkling blue waters of Clearwater Lake, Danny felt a surge of pride. He looked up at his mom, grinning from ear to ear. "This is awesome," he said excitedly. "Now I can swim like everyone else." Lisa laughed, tears welling up in her eyes. "You've earned this, sweetheart," she said, hugging him tightly. "This is your victory as much as anyone's." The Rock and John Cena made a special appearance at the ceremony, drawing cheers from the crowd. They spent time chatting with families, taking photos, and signing autographs, just as they had done months earlier. But this time the atmosphere was different. It was filled with joy and celebration rather than fear and uncertainty. Before leaving, The Rock knelt beside Danny one last time, offering him a fist bump. "Remember what I told you," he said, with a wink. "You're a superhero, kid. Keep shining." Danny nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. As he watched The Rock and John Cena walk away, he felt a deep sense of peace. Life might throw challenges his way, but he now knew he had the strength to face them, and the support of incredible people who believed in him. Clearwater Lake had become more than just a beautiful spot for picnics and swimming. It had become a symbol of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of community coming together to create something meaningful. And for Danny, it was proof that even in the toughest moments, hope could rise from the depths of despair. As the seasons changed and autumn painted Clearwater Lake in shades of gold and crimson, life continued to evolve for everyone touched by the events of that unforgettable summer evening. The newly built wheelchair-accessible dock had quickly become a centerpiece of the lake, not just for its practical purpose but for the message it represented: hope, inclusivity, and resilience. Families visited regularly, bringing their children to splash in the water or simply enjoy the peaceful surroundings. For Danny, the dock was more than just a structure. It was a gateway to freedom and adventure. Lisa noticed a shift in her son's confidence since the day of the incident. Before, Danny often hesitated to join activities at the lake, worried about being different or inconveniencing others. Now he eagerly wheeled himself onto the dock, laughing as he dipped his hands into the cool water, or calling out to other kids playing nearby. His joy was infectious, drawing smiles from strangers who stopped to watch him interact with the world around him. Lisa couldn't help but feel proud every time she saw him embracing life so fully, despite the challenges he faced. The Rock and John Cena remained committed to supporting causes inspired by the incident. Their advocacy extended beyond Clearwater Lake, sparking conversations nationwide about accessibility and inclusion. They partnered with organizations focused on improving public spaces for individuals with disabilities, using their platforms to amplify voices often overlooked. Social media posts featuring photos of Danny on the new dock went viral, further fueling discussions about creating environments where everyone could thrive. For Jake, the months following the incident were a journey of self-discovery and redemption. Volunteering at the community center had opened doors he never imagined possible. He found solace in helping others, whether it was mentoring troubled teens or assisting with construction projects like the one at Clearwater Lake. Each act of service brought him closer to understanding the impact of kindness, a concept he once dismissed as weakness. One chilly Saturday morning, Jake arrived at the lake to lend a hand during a cleanup event organized by local volunteers. Armed with gloves and trash bags, he worked alongside neighbors, picking up litter and trimming overgrown bushes. Though he kept mostly to himself, his quiet determination didn't go unnoticed. Lisa spotted him from across the shore, her heart skipping a beat as memories of that fateful evening flooded back. She hesitated for a moment before approaching him cautiously. "Jake," she said softly, catching his attention, "thank you for coming today." Jake froze, unsure how to respond. He removed his work gloves and rubbed them nervously between his fingers. I thought it was the least I could do," he admitted. "After everything." Lisa nodded slowly, studying his face. There was sincerity in his eyes, a stark contrast to the angry man she remembered from months ago. "It means a lot," she replied after a pause. "Not just to me, but to everyone here." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Finally, Lisa spoke again, her voice softer this time. "Danny forgives you, you know. And honestly, so do I. What matters now is what you choose to do moving forward." Jake swallowed hard, overwhelmed by her words. Forgiveness wasn't something he felt he deserved, yet hearing it from Lisa gave him a glimmer of hope. "I'll keep trying," he promised. Every day. Word of Jake's efforts began to spread within the community. People who had once judged him harshly started to see him differently, recognizing the effort he put into changing his life. Some even reached out to thank him personally, sharing stories of how his transformation inspired them to reflect on their own actions. It wasn't easy. He still faced moments of doubt and temptation, but he reminded himself daily of the lessons he'd learned: accountability, humility, and the power of second chances. Back at the lake, Danny continued to inspire those around him. One afternoon, while sitting on the dock with Lisa, he pulled out a sketch pad and began drawing furiously. When he finished, he proudly showed her his latest creation, a comic book hero named Lake Guardian, a character who used his strength to protect people and ensure no one felt left out. The hero's design included a wheelchair, symbolizing mobility and adaptability rather than limitation. "That's amazing, Danny," Lisa exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "You should share this with The Rock and John Cena. I'm sure they'd love to see it." Danny's eyes lit up at the idea. "Do you think they would?" he asked excitedly. "I know they would," Lisa assured him. "Why don't we send them a copy? Maybe they'll even write back." True to her word, Lisa helped Danny prepare a package containing his drawings and a handwritten letter, explaining the inspiration behind Lake Guardian. A few weeks later, they received a response, an envelope adorned with official WWE logos. Inside was a heartfelt note from The Rock and John Cena, congratulating Danny on his creativity and thanking him for sharing his story. They praised his ability to turn adversity into art, encouraging him to keep pursuing his dreams. Encouraged by their support, Danny decided to take things a step further. With Lisa's help, he launched a small online fundraiser to publish his comic book, hoping to inspire other kids with disabilities. The campaign gained traction almost immediately, thanks in part to endorsements from The Rock and John Cena, who shared the link with their millions of followers. Within days, donations poured in, surpassing the initial goal by a wide margin. When the first batch of Lake Guardian comics arrived, Danny couldn't contain his excitement. He handed copies to friends, teachers, and anyone who visited the lake, spreading his message of resilience and inclusion far and wide. Local schools invited him to speak about his journey, giving him a platform to encourage others to embrace their uniqueness and believe in themselves. Clearwater Lake became a hub of positivity, attracting visitors from neighboring towns, eager to experience its welcoming atmosphere. Families marveled at the accessible dock, while children flipped through pages of Lake Guardian, imagining themselves as heroes capable of overcoming any obstacle. Even Jake found himself returning frequently, finding peace in the tranquil setting and satisfaction in knowing he had played a small role in making it better. As winter approached and snow blanketed the landscape, the spirit of Clearwater Lake remained alive in the hearts of those connected to it. For Danny, it was proof that kindness and courage could transform even the darkest moments into opportunities for growth. For Lisa, it was a reminder of the strength her son possessed and the incredible community that rallied around them. For Jake, it was a second chance, a chance to rewrite his story and leave a legacy worth remembering. And for The Rock and John Cena, it was validation that their actions, no matter how small, had the power to create lasting change. In saving Danny that summer evening, they hadn't just rescued a boy. They had ignited a movement, inspiring countless others to build bridges instead of walls and to celebrate differences rather than fear them. Though their paths may never cross again, the bond forged at Clearwater Lake endured, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, forgiveness, and the belief that every person has the potential to make the world a little brighter. Winter gave way to spring, and Clearwater Lake welcomed the change with open arms. The snow melted, revealing lush green grass and budding flowers along its shores. Families returned in droves, eager to enjoy the fresh air and sunshine after months of cold weather. For Danny, the arrival of spring marked a new chapter, not just in nature but in his life. His comic book, Lake Guardian, had become a local sensation, inspiring children and adults alike with its message of courage and inclusion. Lisa watched her son thrive in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Danny's confidence soared as he took on speaking engagements at schools and community events, sharing his story with anyone willing to listen. He talked about the challenges he faced growing up with a disability, but more importantly, he emphasized the importance of kindness, resilience, and believing in oneself. Each time he stood in front of an audience, his voice grew stronger, his words more impactful. People left his talks feeling inspired, carrying pieces of his optimism into their own lives. The Rock and John Cena stayed connected to Danny and Lisa, checking in regularly through phone calls or video chats. They often shared updates about their advocacy work, letting Danny know how much his story continued to inspire others. "You're making waves, kid," The Rock told him during one call, "not just here but everywhere." Danny beamed at the compliment, clutching his sketchpad close to his chest. "I'm just trying to help people see they can be heroes too," he replied shyly, and help them he did. Copies of Lake Guardian spread beyond the local community, reaching readers across the country. Teachers used it in classrooms to teach lessons about empathy and perseverance. Parents read it to their children before bedtime, sparking conversations about acceptance and understanding. Even hospitals began stocking it in waiting rooms, offering patients a reminder that strength comes in many forms. Jake also found himself drawn to the lake as spring unfolded. Though he no longer lived nearby, he made frequent trips back to volunteer at cleanup events or assist with maintenance projects around the dock. His presence was no longer met with suspicion or hostility. Instead, Neighbors greeted him warmly, acknowledging the effort he'd put into turning his life around. Some even joked that he'd become the unofficial caretaker of Clearwater Lake, always ready to lend a hand whenever needed. One sunny afternoon, while sweeping leaves from the path near the dock, Jake spotted Danny and Lisa sitting together by the water. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to approach them. Over the past few months, he'd exchanged occasional pleasantries with Lisa, but this was the first time he'd seen Danny since the incident. "Hey," Jake said softly, stopping a few feet away. "Mind if I join you?" Lisa glanced up, surprised, but not unwelcoming. "Of course not," she replied, shifting slightly to make room on the blanket. Danny looked up at Jake, studying him curiously. "Are you still volunteering here?" he asked. Jake nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, I like being able to help out. It feels good, you know?" Danny tilted his head thoughtfully. "That's cool. Thanks for everything you've done." Sincerity in Danny's voice caught Jake off guard. He blinked, unsure how to respond. "I don't deserve your thanks," he admitted quietly. "But I'm glad I can do something to make things better. For you, for everyone." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the birds chirping overhead and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Eventually, Danny pulled out his sketch pad and showed Jake some of his latest drawings. "This is my new comic," he explained excitedly. "It's about teamwork and helping each other." Jake flipped through the pages, genuinely impressed by Danny's talent and creativity. "These are incredible," he said sincerely. "You're going to change a lot of lives with these stories." Danny grinned, clearly pleased with the praise. "Thanks, Jake. Maybe someday you'll write your own story, about how you changed too." Jake chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "I don't think anyone wants to read that one," he joked. But deep down, he appreciated the sentiment. Danny's ability to see the good in people, even someone like him, was humbling and motivating all at once. As the weeks passed, Clearwater Lake became a symbol of unity and progress. Local businesses collaborated to host festivals celebrating diversity and accessibility, drawing visitors from surrounding areas. Artists painted murals depicting scenes of inclusivity along the pathways, while musicians performed free concerts on weekends. The lake transformed into more than just a recreational spot. It became a beacon of hope and connection for the entire community. During one such festival, Danny was invited to unveil a plaque commemorating the construction of the accessible dock. Standing beside Lisa, the Rock, and John Cena, who had flown in specially for the occasion, Danny addressed the crowd with poise and determination. "This dock means so much to me," he began, his voice steady despite the sea of faces, staring back at him. "It's not just about being able to reach the water, it's about showing everyone that we all belong here. No matter who you are or what challenges you face, there's a place for you at Clearwater Lake." Applause erupted as Danny finished, speaking, echoing across the water and filling the air with warmth. The Rock stepped forward next, placing a hand on Danny's shoulder. "This kid right here is proof that true strength isn't about muscles or fame, it's about heart," he said, his tone filled with admiration. "Danny reminds us every day that kindness and courage can move mountains." John Cena followed, adding his own thoughts. "We came here because we wanted to help," he said. "But what we didn't expect was how much Danny would end up teaching us. He's reminded us all that heroism isn't defined by capes or powers. It's about lifting others up and making the world a better place." As the ceremony concluded, families gathered around the dock, taking photos and enjoying the festivities. Danny wheeled himself onto the structure, grinning as he dipped his hands into the cool water. Nearby, Jake stood quietly, watching the scene unfold with a sense of pride and gratitude. He may have played a small role in bringing attention to the need for accessibility, but seeing the joy on Danny's face reinforced why his efforts mattered. Years later, when people spoke of Clearwater Lake, they wouldn't just remember the beautiful scenery or the fun activities. They'd remember the boy whose bravery inspired a movement, the celebrities who chose to step up, and the man who learned to change. Most importantly, they'd remember the lesson that emerged from it all. that even in moments of darkness, light can shine through, and sometimes that light takes the form of unexpected heroes. For Danny, Lisa, Jake, The Rock, and John Cena, Clearwater Lake remained a testament to the power of compassion and second chances. It proved that no act of kindness, no matter how small, goes unnoticed, and that together, ordinary people can create extraordinary change.